Welcome to the Pride Perspectives radio show here on K-Squid Radio, 90.7 FM, 89.7 FM, and KSQT 89.7, serving Santa Cruz and Monterey counties. My name is Cece Pinero. My pronouns are she, her. Our Pride Perspectives radio show is here on K-Squid every other Sunday from 5 to 6 p.m. Find all recordings and updates on the Santa Cruz Pride website, santacruzpride.org. Anyway, today's show is celebrating queer composers and the Cabrillo Festival of Contemporary Music with Riley Nicholson. I'm going to tell a little bit about the 2026 Cabrillo Festival of Contemporary Music. It takes place in downtown Santa Cruz from July 26th through August 9th. The theme this year is We Are the Dreamers and features 4 world premiere festival commissions, 8 West Coast premieres, and 2 U.S. premieres brought to life by the dynamic global roster of over 20 composers and an extraordinary array of guest artists. We the Dreamers is both an invitation and a responsibility, and we are asking how music can help imagine a more expansive we, in quotations, says music director Christian McElroy. 2 queer composers will be featured, and they are Ellen Katz-Charon, who's composed Rainbow Promise, that celebrates the struggle and success of marriage equality in the UK. And we're going to hear a little bit about that in a little bit. You'll get to hear portions of that, Rainbow Promise. And Sean Shepard presents Wanderlust, that is an homage to movement and belonging. Executive Director Riley Nicholson will share insights about the festival and bring along some musical surprises. And he's here with us today in the studio. And before we get to Riley, our show is guided by the following beliefs. We believe that Santa Cruz County is thriving, partly because of the contribution of LGBTQ plus people, and LGBTQ plus people in Santa Cruz County are thriving because of the broader Santa Cruz County. We believe in the words of Jewish poet Emma Lazarus that none of us are free until all of us are free. On this show, you will hear us refer to queer history and LGBTQ plus history. For us, these terms are interchangeable and refer to people who identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, anywhere on the gender identity spectrum, and who they are attracted to. All are welcome to be part of this radio show. Last week we had the Monterey Pride Peninsula Grand Marshals on, and just a little takeaway from that is they had mentioned being emerging queer people, emerging queer person. Like, I am an emerging queer person. And I really like that because, queer is a word we've taken back, and to be emerging means we're always changing, and we are always changing in our queerness and in our, world, and just always to say, I like that being, because I used to always just say I was a radical lesbian feminist. That's what I always used to call myself, but I like that being an emerging queer person. Sounds more well-rounded. Anyway, here we are. We are here with Riley Nelson, who is the Cabrillo Festival of Contemporary Music Executive Director. Well, welcome, Riley.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, and so we're just going to start, I'm just going to start by asking you just a couple questions, and then we'll, probably play some nice music. So can you start by introducing yourself and share a little bit about where you grew up and what school was like for you?
Sure, yeah. So I'm from Hot Springs, Arkansas, and I started playing percussion in band, and that's how I got my start, although my entire family on my dad's side is in music, so that I've got a lot of exposure to music in general, but especially professional musicians and what that looks like.
What kind of music did your parents play?
Dad's actually the only one who's an amateur. Everybody else has a music degree, but he's great. He's a self-taught guitarist. So my uncle is trombonist, Anne is a violinist, another Anne is a French horn. The list goes on. So it's in the DNA or something. But yeah, they were very supportive, and I also started taking piano lessons. And the school I went to had a great music program, so it was a great start. I mean, and an ode to, yes, I did private piano, but really I got the start through the public, music education program. And so I think it's always important to give a shout out to how integral that is to the pipeline of new artists is music in schools.
Yeah, very important. So they had music and did they give you instruments? Did they have instruments and they had music programs? And what grades did they have the music programs for you guys?
Yeah, it started in 6th grade for us. I wish it would have started earlier, but it still worked out. So yeah, we had music classes, but in earnest, the band program started at 6th grade, and they let us choose. I chose percussion really for no other reason than it was the most competitive. And so you had to test into that one. And of course I wanted to get the perfect test,
Uh-huh.
But yeah, it was great. I grew up in Arkansas. It's a very conservative area. I feel like school would have been very different if I had come out earlier. I didn't come out until college. So that we might be having a different conversation. But luckily I was able to come out on my own timeline, and it all eventually worked out. I went to college and started studied percussion performance, and eventually started composing. And then when I went to grad school at San Francisco Conservatory, I decided I wanted to really focus on composing. And then throughout my career, I learned that I also really enjoy supporting other artists, and through producing other people's shows and bringing artists together and creating an infrastructure where creativity can happen. And so I have continued to both do a dual life of composer and arts management and leadership.
Wow, that is great. So I heard you say you didn't come out till college. So does that mean that at your junior high or high school, there was no like gay straight alliances or anything like that that we have here in California?
No.
So was there, any education?
Nothing.
Or there was nothing that, no, was there, what other groups were on campus? I mean, like, and did they teach like, abstinence, or, I mean, what did they teach about? Did you have any, sex education?
I think there was a sex ed class, but it was optional, and I was focused on the AP sort of trajectory, so I didn't do it.
And they had,
and I have
did
no
they have
idea
boys
what they
and
said
girls separate?
I don't think
classes?
so. I don't think so. Yeah, so that was probably an interesting class. But yeah, they had no LGBTQ alliances, there were a couple of out people, and I think I kind of kept my distance because I didn't fully realize who I was. So I don't really know what it was like for them, the out kids. But they certainly didn't have any actual infrastructure, unless I'm completely missed it. That did exist. That the only first gay straight alliance, LGBTQ club, whatever you want to call it, I forget what they called themselves, but in college at University of Memphis, they did have it there. But that was the first time I actually saw people gather in a way that was celebrated, not,
So you could exhale and then join that club and come out, or
it took a minute
be yourself
to figure it out, but yeah.
So I know you talked about your besides your family, was there anything else that caused you to go into music?
In college I did psychology and music. I did a dual path because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I knew I loved music, but I just wasn't sure. And I pursued that dual track the entire time. And sort of last minute, I couldn't make a decision until I was listening to a piece, by Kevin Bolins, performed by Piano Circus, a piece for 6 pianos called Kneeling Dance. And I just sort of had this epiphany sort of feeling. I was sort of knowing that music was my path. I didn't feel like it wasn't a decision. It was okay, this is what I'm doing.
Wow. Well, now we all want to hear that. So it's called Kneeling Dance, and that was the light bulb went off, and you just heard something. So it's music is so inspiring. It's really great that you can pinpoint that one piece that really rocketed you into the next dimension, right?
Truly.
So How did you develop your composing and piano playing skills?
I just started doing it on my own, and I didn't know if I knew if it was called composing at first. When I was a kid, I would just make up songs on my own, and then eventually started writing them down. And then in college, started doing it more in earnest and working with friends, writing things for friends, and so it was sort of a gradual thing from sort of very just on my own, coming up with little tunes on the piano, to actually writing them down and collaborating with fellow music students.
So when you were making up songs on the piano as a kid, were you then inspired to learn to read music? When did you learn to read music?
Sort of simultaneously, yeah. I mean, as I was studying, as I was taking private lessons, it wasn't part of my lesson plan, but on the side, after I got through, my exercises or whatever I was working on, then I would come up with my own stuff and not necessarily write it down, but just for fun.
Yeah. Well, that's good because it should be fun, right?
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
do what you love, right? So are there any other instruments you play? Or what do you...
Yeah, piano and percussion is pretty much it. I wish I could do more, but, only so much time in a day.
Right. Okay, well, I think we're going to take a short break and enjoy a composition called Rainbow Promise, and that is by Elena Katz-Chernin. Elena will have a U.S. premiere performed at the festival.
Welcome back. That was Rainbow Promise by Elena Katz-Chernin. Thanks to the BBC for giving us permission to rebroadcast this. It was commissioned by the BBC Radio 3 and performed by the BBC Scottish Symphony Orchestra with conductor Alpesh Chauhan. And you can hear the Cabrillo Festival Orchestra play that same piece August 9th at the Santa Cruz Civic Auditorium with conductor Christian Macellaro. And that's closing night of the Cabrillo Festival of Contemporary Music 2026.
Great. Thanks, Riley. I'm Cece Pinero, and you're listening to Pride Perspectives radio show here on K-Squid Radio, 90.7 FM, 89.7 FM, and KSQT, 89.7 Prunedale, serving Santa Cruz and Monterey counties. We're talking with Riley Nicholson, Executive Director of the Cabrillo Festival of Contemporary Music, that will take place in downtown Santa Cruz from July 26th to August 9th. Okay, Riley, I felt the Rainbow Promise in that piece. That was wonderful. We know you came to Santa Cruz in 2023 to become the executive director of the Cabrillo Festival of Contemporary Music. What about this position caused you to come to Santa Cruz? Or, yeah, is this what caused you to come to Santa Cruz? Or
yeah. I mean, this is the only. My passion is contemporary music, and I love orchestra. And so this is the only festival orchestra out there that plays so much new music, certainly in the U.S., that plays so much new music in such a concentrated, time period, and it's all contemporary. There's a million orchestras out there, there's a million festivals out there, but we're the only one that has this exclusive focus on living artists. And so and Santa Cruz is incredible. So this is a dream to be here in many ways.
That's amazing. I didn't even know that. I can't believe it. Again, Santa Cruz is the leader.
In so many things.
And I'm surprised that it hasn't caught on other places. So that could be, your next alliteration of your life is to start these everywhere else.
We're not ready to franchise just yet, but...
There you go. Okay, what are some of the highlights for you since coming to Santa Cruz, personally and professionally?
Yeah, well, of course, I have to say the last two seasons. It's such a interesting, strange model. You work all year for this one festival. Now, granted, we do about as much programming as like another regional orchestra would do that's spread out throughout the year. We do the same amount of programming in 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks. So it's a very interesting timeline, but it's always very exciting, and I've felt very happy with the last two seasons. It's like a reunion. All the musicians, we get to see them again. All the composers get to gather, and you don't usually see so many composers in one place at one time, so that's always fun. I'd say last year was a highlight, kind of segueing to both the personal and professional. Last year we celebrated 50 years of Pride in Santa Cruz, and it was just such a wonderful time to be here in general and really see the heart of this community show up for that anniversary, and also kind of learn about the history, of course, that I wasn't here for. So that was really meaningful to me on many levels, and then it was also meaningful, with my work life as we connected to it last year we called our season last year Colorful and Courageous, and it was an homage to that legacy, and we connected with that in several different ways. So that was certainly a highlight, just fun in general, but also really meaningful to dive deeper and really understand the spirit of this place.
Well, and that's why we started this radio show. Rob and I started this to honor the 50 years of Pride in Santa Cruz and how important that is, and to celebrate, and so that's really good that everybody, it's like we all have our own thing to honor and celebrate this history. So and
it continues.
Yeah, and it continues, and
right.
And here we're gonna keep going. Yeah. So in 2025, you composed a new work entitled "Holy" for electric guitars, and premiered at the New Music Works on May 18th in 2025. Could you share a little bit how this work speaks to your queerness and religion?
Yeah, that was one of the most personal works I've ever written. I usually write, every work is personal, but it's usually a little more abstract. This was a bit more personal in the sense that, so the piece was holy, as you mentioned, and it was there were no words, but it was kind of inspired by and my own kind of creative reckoning with the idea of what is holy, like what is sacred, how can, as queer people, we reclaim sort of that legacy, because I was cut off from that because I chose to go a different way. And so, growing up very Free Will Baptist, very, very conservative, right? And so I was kind of thinking, how can we, thinking about sacred music, thinking about both the actual legacy of that type of music, right? And how deep that is, and I can still connect with that even though I'm no longer religious, right? That it's still mine, not in an ownership way, but in a, that's where I came from, and I can connect with that legacy of music, which is so deep. And so, and then also just kind of processing raw emotions around, so it's sort of rebellious, it's sort of reverent and beautiful, but also kind of tortured and rebellious at the same time. So the idea of a holy piece that's for electric guitar is sort of, there's already kind of a juxtaposition there of the rebellious instrument, but a sacred topic, right? So it was really fun to just kind of examine this and put it on the page, and it was cathartic in a way.
I love that, and that you did this for electric guitar. And earlier you said your dad played guitar.
Yeah.
So he could play this, and any electric guitar piece could also be played on an acoustic guitar if that's what he plays. But you hadn't specified whether he plays both. If he's self-taught, he can plug that in and play the electric guitar.
Maybe.
Or make it acoustic. Who knows? And that you and your dad could connect on that on a spiritual level, in a sacred space, right? Like public access radio, and this is a sacred space, and we are the last bastion of free speech, and so that's very important to me. That feels sacred to me, right? Yeah. So we all have our spaces that
I feel that way about my work at the Cabrillo Festival. And connect with something I heard Ellen and Tom Frederick say, which is we create, they might have phrased it slightly differently, but essentially they were saying we create the sacred ground, prepare the sacred ground, because it is for artists to come and be themselves and perform not only at their highest level, but also at their highest artistic expression level, which means showing up with your full self and being supported to do that. So it is important to create those spaces.
It is so amazing that we're doing this here in Santa Cruz, because Santa Cruz is really the crossroads. It means the cross, where it's right. The crossroads where between the worlds, I like to say. And between the worlds can mean anything, between the space of Arkansas to here, to California, or the space between sitting at the piano when you're a child and playing the piano and then becoming a composer. There's so much sacred space, and it's just amazing that Santa Cruz is a place where people can come and do this. I've always been in awe that this is unlike any other place. And I'm one of those people. I was born here. And when I was, 18, 19, I'm like, I'm out of here. And I literally traveled back and forth across country 4 times. And I'm like, oh my God, I feel like Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. I'm like, I lived at the best place. I'm going back home. I didn't have to look any farther than my own backyard to find my heart's desire. And it was really something. But as a kid, wherever you grow up, you don't realize that. Right. But it's really, and I've looked a lot of places to see if there's any other really place that feels like home or that is a spiritual, sacred place. And we're really lucky. So I'm very excited to hear that, this Cabrillo of Contemporary Music is only here, people.
It is.
Yeah. So last year, the Cabrillo Festival's theme was colorful and courageous. And this year's theme is We the Dreamers. How did you choose the theme and why is it important this year?
Well, so, as a lot of our organizations do, and a lot of cultural institutions in general have been marking the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. So that was the initial seedling of the idea that came forth through that. Initially, the NEA, National Endowment for the Arts, was prioritizing applications that had that theme. We decided not to apply because there's some tricky legal compliance things around executive orders that we decided that we didn't want to expose the festival to. But we decided we wanted to keep the theme because it's not sort of just a unthoughtful celebration of patriotism, but rather we're looking at who is the we of America and how can we, what is sort of taking stock at the wide perspective of what America is today, not just the monolithic, it's not one thing, it's a country of immigrants, it's a country of, all kinds of different things, and we want to try to capture that wide picture. And the arts have a unique ability to give lots of different types of music, lots of different types of composers from all kinds of different backgrounds. Music kind of gives that cultural exchange a platform that's really vibrant. So and it's also a place for cultural discourse. I mean, we really need cultural discourse right now and to have conversations. And so that's sort of why we chose to lean in this direction. And not every piece is super on the nose, but you have like Lincoln's or Philip Glass's Symphony No. 15, which uses the text from Lincoln. We have Vivian Fung's piece, Commission. She's responding to the national anthem in this sort of fraught, complex time. And so it's called America the Beautiful ? And so there's lots of different pieces I could go on, but that connect with this overall theme in different ways. And so I think it's really timely for us to exercise our right to creative expression.
Well said. And we are going to take a little break here, and we'll be back again with Riley, and we're going to also hear from Sean Shepard. But the Cabrillo Festival of Contemporary Music is July 26th through August 9th. Get your tickets now. We're taking a short break, and then we will hear from Riley again and Sean Shepard. Enjoy the music composition from Sean Shepard called Melt. Sean will have a West Coast premiere performed at the festival. Now, did you all melt to that beautiful composition by Sean Shepard? Hi, I'm back from my melt. This is Cece Pinero. You're listening to Pride Perspectives radio show. Today we're talking with Riley Nicholson, Executive Director of the Cabrillo Festival of Contemporary Music that will take place in downtown Santa Cruz from July 26th to August 9th. And Riley has brought along with him musician-composer from the festival, Sean Shepard. We're pleased to welcome Sean. Hi, Sean.
Hi, Cece. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you so much. That was beautiful composition. I look forward to hearing the rest of it. Anyway, can you tell us a little bit, where did you grow up and what schools did you attend?
So actually, I was listening to your eloquent words about pride of place, and I feel like I came from a very interesting place as well. I actually grew up in northern Nevada. And then in the Lake Tahoe area, my parents settled there before they eventually retired in Colorado. But I was on one side of my family, fourth generation Nevadan, and on the other side, fifth. So they were originally the Basque sheep herders that came, and the kind of the frontiersmen even before gambling was legal. And it was just one of those very, very interesting, and now as I get older, strange places to have kind of come into the world. And so, but I also, of course, feel very much, very deeply in my blood and bones, a Westerner. That sort of 12 Western states, each one of them feels like a different kind of planet. But I always just feel so at home when I'm there. And then, having said that, now I live in New York. The sort of opposite of all that. But,
yes. Well, from the wild, wild West to New York.
To being as tamed as possible.
You must have wanderlust.
Yes, exactly. This piece that will be appearing on this year's festival on August 9th is actually a story that I have is rather old already. The piece is, I think, 16 years old, and it was a piece about this sort of life of travels that I had that I thought would probably be slowing down, and I feel like now it's like chapter one in the book of my life of just constantly moving around. I am happy to be back in New York with my family, but recently have moved from Chicago, and before that was in Pittsburgh. So it's a wonderful place to be, but as I say, I feel very, very at home in a place like Santa Cruz, in which I think for me, it's really hard to top the Pacific Ocean, no matter what side of the water you're on. A sunrise or a sunset over the Pacific is very hard to beat.
That's true. That's true. Thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. I'm with you on that. Very old-timey Californian myself. So can you share a little bit about your coming out experience?
Sure. Gosh, that was also so fascinating, and I love talking about these things. Very often, when people are asking me to talk about my music, they're generally not interested in these other very sort of core parts of one's being, I would say, in many ways. I guess I grew up in this sort of hyper-masculine world of rodeo and, ranching and all these things in a place like Nevada. So coming out was a complicated process, and I think I was one of these people that didn't really have so much of a sense of myself when I was, let's say in high school or something like that. I was very passionate about music and very passionate about, all these exciting things, and like travel and concerts, and classical music was a kind of a refuge for me, but didn't really realize what I was kind of not really facing until I actually until I went to school. So I did my undergraduate degree at Indiana, and it, for all of we might hear about the state now, it was Bloomington is quite the I would say the gay bastion. So it was a place where I really and it was a place where I also was able to make these realizations in my own time, that I had all these wonderful friends around me, and they were so interesting and so enthusiastic, so positive about their lives and their directions and everything. And it turns out every last one of us ends up being gay or queer on some level. And that was just like a fascinating kind of experience to be like, oh yeah, what's drawing us toward each other? And it's not necessarily sexuality. I think that's certainly a part of it, but there was a part of it that's just a feeling of commune or of community that it's very hard to put your finger on until you're really in it. So I feel like the way my coming out experience was, I think in my sophomore year of college, I sort of came home back to Reno and I kind of planned a bunch of like social things, and I told one group of friends one night and another group of friends another night and then my parents the next night, and sort of got it all out of the way when I was 19 years old. And I think I sort of left everyone in a little bit of shock. This was still the 1900s, we may remember. And I think, now it's one of those things that feels almost like a kind of, like, I don't know, I'm like grandpa in my rocking chair being like, how it used to be. But, things were really quite different in terms of, I was the first gay person my parents had ever knowingly met.
Wow.
And they were wonderful about it. They were very, I think on some level surprised, another level, immediately supportive, and on another level, I think there was a lot of kind of understanding that had to come along. Like, okay, well, this is how this goes now, and this is how this goes, and all these things. So,
well,
okay.
that indescribable community that you found, wouldn't music be able to describe that? And do you have any compositions that would describe that? And if not, when are you going to write it?
Oh, that's a really good question, and that's a really good. That is a very, very worthy and noble suggestion in terms of it's one of these things I haven't actually quite given enough thought about how I would kind of access that in myself to sort of. So, for example, the piece we heard just a little earlier, this piece Melt. It's really about glacial melt and this long story. But the music you heard is really this my idea of like an ice field at 20,000 feet high and this kind of real glacier.
And they are melting. The ice.
Oh my gosh! Absolutely.
Yeah, the world is melting. The icebergs are melting. So
yes.
And
I know I would have never really written that exact piece or those notes without having that kind of sense of the story and the sense of my own, that the kind of climate change panic. I think it can be on a societal level, but I think for me it's my own personal. I've seen this in my own lifetime. The being a child of the mountains, you get very attached to the way things are.
Yeah, well, you mentioned being a grandpa in a rocking chair. I am a grandma in a rocking chair, so you're not alone in that. My grandson is a freshman in college, so and that's why I am a little bit, presumptuous in asking you to create this new bulk of music with this thing that you just mentioned. But it is, I appreciate that you would consider that and think about it. Its time has come soon.
Well, I mean, I think also to your point, the most valuable single sentence I ever heard about being a composer or being an artist, it came from a composer I admire very much, but I didn't know personally at the time. Her name was Libby Larson, terrific composer based in Minneapolis, and she was giving a master class, sort of a talk to young composers at Indiana University when I was studying there. And she said, you know what, your story is your own, and no one could possibly tell it better than you can. And I thought that was really salient for someone in music who was really concerned about trying to fit in or trying to do the thing that other people were doing. And it was a real lightning bolt for me, but I think on the level that you're describing, this is a huge part of my story, and it is probably high time I thought about how I'm going to tell it. So thank you for the suggestions.
Yes, and here we are. We're on the radio live. Everybody's hearing it, so here we go.
Now we speak it into the universe.
It's out in the universe. So tell me, how did you develop your expertise in music?
It was really quite self-guided. I was kind of a freak for it when I was a kid, and this is back in the days of, not to keep going on about how old I am, but there were CDs, there were things you acquired and you bought, and I was very, 11, 12 years old, kind of obsessed with John Williams and in some ways Broadway musicals, and in some ways pop music, and in some ways classical music, and I was just kind of voracious. And as I got older, I started finding ways to kind of approach it more narrowly. I was also a performing musician for many years as a bassoonist, and so I spent a lot of time sitting in orchestras, which is one of those. It's impossible to try to codify that kind of experience as a composer. That, if you think of the greats, someone like Rachmaninoff or someone like Mendelssohn, these people were incredibly good at being performers and being communicators via their instrument. And so a lot of my world has to do with orchestras, and the way I kind of start thinking about it like a typewriter with all the keys. That's to steal a quote from the great Magnus Lindberg, a Finnish composer. But it's true that the orchestra kind of has it all, and it's one of the only places where you hear this kind of incredible synchronicity of, somewhere between 60 and 160 musicians on stage at once doing the exact same thing. It's magical to me. It always has been.
Yeah, and
so
that's why
I
that is the place that could describe the community, because it is a community together with each different instrument telling its piece of the puzzle. I'm fascinated by this, and I really am excited that you're really going to take this on here, Grandpa. Okay?
Yes, exactly. And that's true. I think there is that's one of the other special things about music that, yes, we are a troupe and we are a cohort, but, everyone has a very specific role. The second clarinetist is doing a lot of things that no one else is doing on that concert. Almost everything they do is entirely alone. But the viola section is, if you take, any single section out of the orchestra, then it's, there's a very distinct thing that's really missing. So there is this sense of, it's funny because I think it's also a very hierarchical world in which the concertmaster has specific responsibilities, and they're very different than the tubist and all these, and we all kind of grow into our roles. But in the end of the day, it is truly a community. I mean, I don't know any other way to describe it other than, it's a kind of a band with a mission.
There you go. Okay, so let's see. You mentioned, were you 12? Like, how young were you when you started playing music and then also writing and composing?
I think it was about 10 or 11, whatever, the first year at the, Washoe County School District. It's like they sort of throw an instrument into every kid's hand, and God bless them for that. I mean, I never would have. I remember being kind of mesmerized by actually seeing a trumpet, and just, wow, okay, that's really a thing. And I ended up choosing the flute early on, and then I got sort of graduated to the bassoon by, one of my teachers said, okay, this is what you're playing now.
So did you play Jethro Tull on the flute?
Oh, gosh, I don't think I ever got good enough to play Jethro Tull on the flute, but I definitely admired him. You become kind of fascinated with all these, soloists and all these...
oh, yeah, and the different genres of music and then what was popular. And like you said, you listened to a little bit of pop music and yeah. So anyway,
I think of someone like Lizzo, who's this, absolute pop
right.
mom, and she's, highly trained in classical music and quite a, as they say, a damn fine flutist. And so there's a lot of opportunities to cross the kind of, as we would used to say, the sort of genre boundaries. But I think I also believe a lot in genre. I think there's a lot that about the experience, for example, of a jazz musician that really has nothing to do with what, let's say, Rachmaninoff or Mendelssohn understood about life. And so I believe that, that's why I like listening to all kinds of music, because I think there's all kinds of stories to be told, all kinds of experiences to take in. And so, as I say, then over the years, I just kept doing it. I mean, I kept going to more schools, so I went from Indiana to Juilliard to Cornell, and then, it's just been scribbling a lot ever since there. And as I say, traveling. So,
yeah, it sounds like you've done a lot of traveling. That's also really an important, good part of School of Life is travel. You learn a lot traveling. How did you become a composer?
I started early on. So right around that time, 10, 11 years old, my mom tells a story. We were at the local music shop, and I needed bassoon reeds or something. And there was like, as you get close to the checkout, there was just like blank, staff paper on the stand, and I just picked it up and said, yes, I need this. And almost from then on, I'm scribbling away. And I have all of those early it's they're really scribbles. The auspicious first notes of any composer, unless they're Mozart, are pretty. I have come a long way, I have to say that. But it's one of those things that's, I don't know, it's a little bit like bakers are born, not bought. There was something in there that I just needed to get out. And I have continued to do it.
So how would you say your queerness impacts your music, or how does music impact your queerness?
This is such a big question, and I have thought about it a lot. I think one of the things that being queer in any of these worlds, and I think what can provide some kind of, I don't know, glimmer of, I don't even know how to put it, a glimmer of a perspective is this feeling of, you know what, I don't think I'm quite the same as these people here, this situation here. I'm not quite sure that this is really what I am. And I had that a lot early on, and I wasn't sure why, as I say. But there's as I say, it's not quite about being an outsider. I didn't necessarily feel shunned, but I definitely didn't feel like, for example, being at a homecoming game when I was the drum major in the high school band, thinking, well, this is all for me. And so there's this sense of you become trained a little bit at being an observer, and I think being an observer is an incredibly basic and important skill on in any kind of creative art. That you have to be aware, not why you're looking at something, but really what it is you're seeing. And I think those skills, the earlier you kind of start peeling back those onions and thinking, well, why is it that this is this way, and why is it that maybe I don't fit in? And I think that it's a little bit of a broad brush, right? So that there are many experiences of being queer that I think also have fed into my life. But I think that's one of the main ones, is this sense of like not necessarily being outside the glass room and looking in, but certainly looking around and saying, okay, well, where do I fit into this, and what is actually happening? I think there's a lot of times where if you feel perfectly comfortable, where is the impetus to decide to take stock? And I think that's just one of those things I think I've found in common with my friends when I was younger, and of course I certainly value it in my friends and community currently.
Yeah.
Being able to look around and just see oneself and to see everything else. It's a hard, but valuable, I think, just valuable for art making.
It gives us the ability to see something that most people consider fundamental and say, what if I actually were to rethink this?
Yeah. And is it fundamental, and is it fundamental to me, and am I, and I think then that goes with all of the self-questioning. Okay, well, why isn't this making sense to me, or why is it that I'm sometimes feeling left out, or sometimes feeling ignored, or there's all kinds of very complicated situations that one can get into at age 10 or age 20 or age 50. And in a way, being queer sort of never ends, right? That there's always the sense of, okay, well, there's the mainstream and there's what. I say that having gone so much more toward a heteronormative life with my two beautiful children and my beautiful husband, and we live in a very happy suburban community. And I think about life in the West Village and the choices I've made as well. So.
Yeah, well, that reminded earlier we talked about the Monterey Pride people we had on last time talked about being emerging queer people, and I just really resonated with that. We talked about that earlier, and I think that sort of describes what you were saying. We are emerging queer people. So just sort of, we're going to get to Riley here again in a minute, but what is your connection to the festival here in Santa Cruz?
So gosh, this is, I want to say, my fourth or fifth year being at Santa Cruz. I also had the true pleasure of writing a piece that was sort of by, for, and about the pandemic. It was as they say, a lot of composers were writing their, in quotes, pandemic pieces, which meant they weren't happening live. And so in 2021, the festival was all virtual. And so I was asked to write a piece that was for this virtual orchestra, which means every member of the Cabrillo Festival Orchestra, got on their nice suit and tie, and they performed the entire concert in front of a camera with a white wall behind them. And so I wrote a piece for this very complicated kind of logistical setup, and that's still one of those more, I would say, more personally challenging, because I was very worried that I was going to write something too complicated or too difficult. And that piece was a piece called Sprout, which then was set to animation by wonderful Ken Matsumura, and we had a wonderful experience there. But as I say, I've had nothing but terrific experiences with performances and premieres and commissions. I also go way back with festival director Christian Matsarlaru. We were co-fellows at the Tanglewood Music Festival in 2005. And so it's been beautiful watching his incredible musicianship sort of blossom into this kind of major international career. And as, of course, as I know him for very long, I know that, his beautiful family is a very important part of him coming to Santa Cruz. His kids and his wife actually really love being there. And so it's a really special place for me. The entire orchestra, I feel like on some level I know them. They're all close friends or old friends or new friends. So it's a wonderful time for me.
Well, I want to ask you both. I want to ask Riley first. So for the past several years, the festival's featured many queer composers. Is there a reason that so many queer people are also music composers? What do you think?
Oh, that is $1 million question.
I love these $1 million questions. Yeah,
I'll
exactly.
Give two.
Okay.
I think one is there are queer people everywhere, of course, and so of course they're going to be in music. And as we become more visible, then it's more apparent, right? But I also think there is something about the creative process, and maybe even music in particular, because it's so ephemeral, it's so abstract. Unless there are words, it's a way for us to communicate. And when we've grown up in context where we're not able to fully express ourselves, so it's an outlet. And I think our imaginations are given extra breathing room because that's our only safe space, and that's the skill you need as a composer. So I think there's no coincidence why there's been so many incredible queer composers, past and present. So it's kind of two answers there.
Yeah, that's great. I'm going to think about that. What about you, Sean? What do you think?
I mean, I completely agree with Riley. I think it is an outlet, and I think there's also this sort of, I don't want to say the abstraction of it. That makes it sound like it's completely divorced from one's own personal. But there is something where there is all the things that are not said. They are music, and so there's a way of putting it through the sieve of one's own experience and perspective and emotional state, and just pushing it through that. That is its own kind of therapy. Not to say anything against talk therapy, which I found useful, and I know any number of other composers could have benefited in history. There is something about it that is really, there's this act of expression simply by, taking your quill pen and putting it on the page. There's something vital there, and there's something vibrant, and also I just think healing. And if that's the worst thing that queer people could be doing, and singing their songs and being the sirens that they are, I think that we need more of it. Yeah,
that well said. So just thinking about, for those who are not tuned in to the contemporary music scene, what are some of the highlights of the week that's coming up that people shouldn't miss? Like, how do we encourage or get young people or older people that are not tuned into this tuned in and inspired, like hearing that one song that Riley heard that's like, oh my God, now this is it, Yeah,
well, all of our one great introduction is our open rehearsals. So all of our rehearsals are not behind closed doors. They're free and open to the public. So it's a great way to be introduced, not only to be introduced if you're not sure, is this music for me or not, but also, it's a way for us to kind of remove the velvet rope. Like, you can see the creative process in action, see how things are rehearsed, see how things come together. So I feel like that's a really exciting way for audiences to get to know the artist in a way that you wouldn't know if you just came to the show.
And when are those open rehearsals?
Almost daily. So I'll save you the long list, but go to CabrilloMusic.org, and almost daily through our entire run, we have open rehearsals, sometimes twice a day. So it's you can pop in, pop out, and then buy a ticket to the show.
Great. And, that's one thing we didn't mention is what time does the show start each evening?
So there's an entire run of shows of artist talks, the open rehearsals that were mentioned. But our main stage, the core programming, is July 31st, picnic and opening night, fanfare at 6:30, concert at 8, and then August 1st, August 8th, August 9th, all those shows are at 7 p.m. Yeah. And then we also have a free family concert at 2 p.m. on August 2nd.
Thank you both for being here. Any final thoughts, Riley and Sean?
Thank you, Sean. We're so excited to hear your piece, and I know I've only Zoomed with you, so I'm excited to meet you in person.
Absolutely. I cannot wait to be back in Santa Cruz, and we would love to see you at the auditorium this summer.
Great. Thanks for tuning in to Pride Perspectives Radio Show.